Good afternoon. Thank you all for joining us today. My name is Inga Waite, and I am the Library and Museums Director for the City of Monterey. And I'm here for our first ever State of the Library, and I'm joined by Marsha Moroh, who is the Chair of the Library Board of Trustees, and Diane Lorimier, the President of the Monterey Public Library Friends and Foundation. Each of them will be discussing their role in planning the library's future. I also want to introduce Mary Jane Perna, our Fund Development Officer, who will be facilitating the questions and answers at the end. So a huge welcome to all of you this afternoon. I'm really overwhelmed by your presence and by the fact that you understand that Monterey Public Library is a central service, really an essential service for our Monterey Peninsula community. I also want to extend a special welcome to some of the folks who have joined us. I know our mayor of Monterey is here and several wonderful staff members from the city. I also want to recognize all of the current and former library trustees who have joined us today. Also in attendance, we have from the Friends and Foundation, we have officers, board members, and committee members. We also have some very special supporters today on the call who have helped provide momentum to the campaign that we're announcing publicly today. And we have 1849 Legacy Society members here as well. And those are folks who've made gifts to preserve California's first public library on into the future. So we have an hour today together, and what's on the agenda? Well, the first thing is I am going to be talking about current library services and operations. Then I will turn it over to Marsha Moroh, who will speak to the work that we're doing together to plan for the library's future. Then Diane Lorimier will talk about the important work of the Friends and Foundation and how you can help support that work. If you have questions, I want to encourage you to enter them in the Q&A box, and Mary Jane will be monitoring the questions and they'll bring them to us to discuss together at the end. If we don't get to your question, and believe me, some really great questions have come in so far already, don't worry, we will email you a response. So what's happening currently at the library? Well, our doors closed to the public in March of 2020, almost a year ago. And the good news is that our staff pivoted quickly and our core services and programs continued to operate and are still operating today. How did we determine what were the core services? Well, we sent a survey out to our community to learn what services you value most and what types of virtual programs you would most like to see offered. We heard from over 600 respondents, and we heard loud and clear that what people wanted access to, first and foremost, was the library collection. People also told us that they used our reference services and that our staff expertise was highly valued. They wanted virtual programming, especially programs to help cope with the stress, to help gain confidence with the new technology, and to learn about our history and to help stay connected, to interact with others, and to maintain a sense of normalcy for themselves and their families. Meanwhile, the city assessed the impact of shelter in place on the city budget, and it was very, very grim. Tens of millions of dollars in revenue were being lost. The city council had to make very difficult decisions about budget cuts, and many people wrote in and called in about the importance of the library. So your support made a difference. The city council recognizes that our community really values library service. We are a community of learners. Well, our fiscal year started off with very, very deep cuts. Over 80% of our staff positions were cut. So we were reduced from 20 full-time staff members to just 4, and the book budget was completely eliminated. But we're still here. And I hear customers at our sidewalk service window on a daily basis say that they're so glad that we're here. People say the library keeps me going. I don't know what my kids would do without you. And in fact, 37% of the materials that circulate are children's materials. So knowing that access to library materials was paramount, the first thing we did when we were closed was we promoted online resources. So online, we have ebooks and films and audiobooks and that sort of thing. We want to make sure everybody knew how to access those. But as soon as it was safe, we launched Sidewalk Service. We launched it in June to provide access to our physical collections. We were the first library in Monterey County to do so, and Sidewalk Service has been tremendously popular. We provide the service 7 hours a day, 5 days a week, and we serve an average of 250 people a day who borrow over 500 items a day. So from April through December, the community borrowed nearly 157,000 books and other materials through contactless pickup and online. Many people tell us that what they miss is being able to browse. They can't come into the library and browse the shelves. Well, we've tried to find some workarounds for that. One is that we have a new service that we launched a couple months ago, I guess, called book bundles. And there's a form on our website and you can describe what kind of books you enjoy and or what age group you need materials for, and a librarian does the browsing for you. This has been really especially helpful for parents who are new to homeschooling. For children's programs, we've been able to bring back weekly read and sing story times on YouTube with Miss Orquídea and monthly Zoom story times as well. And what I love about her story times is she introduces a Spanish word here and there, and so you're learning another language a little bit at a time without even realizing it. It's very fun. And in fact, I was singing one of those songs this morning while I was cooking my breakfast. So if you haven't watched her programs, please do so. Another kids program that we launched in January is a series of 8 creative activities. We called it Kids Create. And it's for preschoolers through second graders. And the activities are hands-on and open-ended, and they encourage children to think independently and develop a creative mindset. So we put together the materials and some starting points, and then customers are able to pick up those materials and take them home. Well, just to give you an idea of the interest level in this kind of programming, because we saw it as an alternative to screen time, we offered 30 signups, and within 4 hours of registration opening, the program was full and we had people on the waiting list. So for those folks who weren't able to get onto the list of registrants, we've also put that information on our website with the list of what materials are needed and what the activities are. And so you can look around your home and find materials and follow along that way. It's a really fun program and educational as well. Also for children, thanks to the Kiwanis Club of Monterey, we've launched Winter Reading. And that's a program that encourages family to spend quality time together, reading together. And what studies have shown is that when adults in a household model that they enjoy reading, that they value reading, that it's a cozy, nice thing to do with your family, then kids wind up loving to read, and it actually improves their performance in school, and they become lifelong learners. So it's a great program, and it's modeled somewhat off of our summer reading program, and we would not have been able to do our summer reading program this year if it hadn't been for a pair of very generous donors who enabled us to provide a virtual summer reading program. So we're grateful for that. As far as adult programs go, when we surveyed the community in the spring and summer, folks said mindfulness, health and wellness, history, and art were the most popular things that they wanted to attend programs on. So we partnered with a great group of historians and had a 7-week-long program celebrating Cannery Row's 75th anniversary, and it was a program that was supported by Cannery Row Company. It was hugely successful. We had over 350 participants. And one of the silver linings of the pandemic was we were able to bring in expert speakers from across the country without having to pay their travel expenses. And then participants were able to join us for the lectures and book talks and so forth from as far away as Alaska and Hawaii and North Carolina and New Mexico. So it was a huge success. We offer weekly drop-in mindfulness practice. We've had poetry workshops, and we offered a multi-generation lantern making craft program. And our follow-up surveys that we circulate afterwards indicate that people really appreciate the free quality programs that we're offering, and they hope that they can continue. So these programs and services would not be possible if it weren't for support from our community, from gifts from our community, and also for people raising their voices as well. Our book budget, which had been $128,000 a year in our general fund, was entirely eliminated in 2021. But thanks to donations of funds and an Amazon wish list that we have on our homepage, purchases have been made, and we've gotten valuable feedback, and our collections are continuing. And that's something that people really appreciate because they look to our collections for inspiration, for education, and for solace, especially during times like this. I want to thank our dedicated staff. So without our core staff, this would not be possible. We have several full-time people who have come back just as hourly workers. We are operating with a skeletal crew who are extremely dedicated and passionate about library service and serving you. And I also want to share our deep gratitude for a highly trained and extremely devoted group of volunteers, collection volunteers. Without them, we literally could not manage to provide sidewalk service. They are shelving thousands of items per week and pulling hundreds of holds for us each day to fulfill customer requests. They contribute over 83 hours per week for mission critical work. So we're deeply grateful. So what's next? Well, when we closed, the Library Board of Trustees rolled up their sleeves and began working with me to plan on how we could reopen. Back then, we didn't realize that we were going to be closed for so long or that we would be dealing with a worsening pandemic. And to hear more about the deliberations and planning the board and I have undertaken, I'm delighted to introduce Professor Marsha Moroh, most recently the Dean of Science at CSUMB, who now chairs the Library Board of Trustees. Marsha is emeritus faculty at CSUMB and also serves on advisory boards at CSUMB Library and of the Osher Institute Osher Lifelong Learning Institute, OLLI, at CSUMB. She's also a volunteer gardener for the city of Monterey. Just as a quick historical bit of information, the city charter established the Board of Library Trustees appointed by the City Council to govern the library. So I report to that board, and the members are my bosses and my partners in setting policy and strategic direction. Marsha has served on the Board of Trustees for 3 years and has been president since July 1st. I'm delighted to introduce her. So Marsha, as chair of the Board of Trustees, how do you view Monterey Public Library in the near and long-term future?
Thanks, Inga. And first of all, thank you all for being here for the library. You know, as Inga said, the library was California's very first public library. It was established in 1849 by a group of local residents. And you can read the story of its beginnings on the library's website. It's really quite a story. As the library grew, it moved to different locations in town until the current library building on Pacific Street was constructed and opened in 1952. That's a long time ago. And the bookmobile service was put into operation in 1953. The bookmobile was part of a commitment to New Monterey and other neighborhoods in our service area when the city closed the branch library in New Monterey. Half of the current vehicle bookmobile was funded actually by private donations. The bookmobile's been serving us from 1953 till this year, providing access for children, seniors, and others who really can't easily get to the library. And we know everybody's anxiously anticipating its return. We also have reciprocal relationships with other libraries. In addition to the PG library, our library participates in a growing and mutually beneficial consortium with other libraries in the area, all of whom provide access at no cost to patrons. So what is a library board and what does it do? As Inga said, the Monterey Public Library Board of Trustees is a different kind of governing structure that most libraries have. It's an administrative board established by the Monterey City Charter, and it's constituted by our City Council. There are 5 seats on the library board, and I'd like to give a shout out to the other 4 current board members: Jennifer Felguth, Harish Joshi, Bob Petty, and Jim Thompson. In the original city charter, the board's primary function was to, quote, select all books, magazines, periodicals, and other items for circulation or study in the library. This power to choose materials was especially important in the era of Steinbeck and his Grapes of Wrath, a book, as you know, reviled by many in California and removed from many a library shelf. So having the board involved in book selection provided allies for the library staff and reduced the long arm of censorship. Nowadays, the board partners with the library director to provide stewardship and guide the library's path to the future. It sets policy for the library, and it tries to ensure it has the resources that it needs. And together, as an example, we have developed a 38-page collection development policy available on the website, which outlines the basic criteria for selection and retention of materials. And the staff follow it very closely. Our duties now include, in addition to policy formation, oversight of the library budget, and of course, advocacy. I must say this has been a heck of a year to be the board chair, presiding over these enormous budget and service cuts and the closing of the building and the bookmobile. The board has worked with Inga and city management to provide the current services to you while the building is closed, to include those Inga mentioned: curbside check-in, reference services via email and phone, and online programs. The board has a 2-person ad hoc planning committee that works closely with Inga and brings ideas to the whole board for discussion. We're now faced with the difficult task of reimagining the library when it opens, albeit with a smaller budget for the foreseeable future. We need to figure out how to do as much or more with less. Some of this can be done with smarter use of technology. One example is a new system that will allow us to check out and shelve books more easily, and even give patrons the option of using their smartphones for checkout. The new system we're implementing was funded by generous private donations. We're also looking at intensifying our online presence and reconfiguring the help desk so that we can use our staff more efficiently, and sharing resources and specialized expertise with other libraries. But we know that library users are a community and love being in the library, and we all look forward to the day when it will be open again. We all remember the good old days when we came in and browsed the stacks, used the computers, read the paper, asked questions in person. And remember all those library events, the kids' story time, after school activities, adult workshops, and other programs. So what will the library look like when it reopens? Here are some general ideas we've identified, which we can realize savings and efficiencies while still meeting the community's needs. We're looking at these strategies and more, using technology in innovative ways to provide access and services, using volunteers where permissible. We do have that dedicated group of volunteers Inga talked about. Teaming up with other libraries to share materials, technology, and programs. Looking at ways to generate revenue, and cutting service hours, although that's something we'd hate to do. We plan to survey the community again to find out what people really want and need from the library, and what's most important to you as we make these critical decisions. And lastly, we know, and I'm sure you've observed, that the current library is too small for the number of people it serves, and its many systems such as restroom facilities and ventilation are outdated and barely functioning. So before the pandemic, the board worked with an architectural firm to conduct a feasibility study for the expansion and rehab of the current library. That project will modernize the systems, reconfigure many of the core functions, and give us much more space in the library. Then the pandemic, and with it the disastrous budget projections hit. And this plan, along with the plans for police, fire, and other buildings, went into the pending file. But there will be an end to this pandemic, we know, and Monterey will bounce back, and we want to be ready with plans in hand for that great day. And most importantly, we turn to our friends and foundation and to you to raise private funding to help keep our libraries strong and accessible. Thank you.
Thank you, Marsha. I'm so glad that you mentioned our beloved bookmobile service. You know, when I talk about library service, I often just include bookmobile. I assume bookmobile, but I'm really glad that you pointed it out and pointed out the importance of private support too. As you mentioned, our bookmobile was funded, 50% of it was funded by a bequest. And so we've relied on private funding as part of the partnership to keep our library going. So thank you. And now I want to introduce Diane. So Diane de Lorimier is president of the Friends and Foundation, having been involved with the library for the last 10 years and becoming the president last year, just in time for the pandemic. But seriously, Diane assumed the presidency in October when the pandemic had dominated our lives and we were peering into a very uncertain future, and we all knew that the Friends' usual activities would be on hold for the foreseeable future. As a little background, the Friends of the Monterey Public Library was established in 1999 as a California nonprofit public benefit corporation and a 501c3 public charity. In January of last year, just 12 months ago, the Friends renamed themselves the Friends and Foundation to signal their understanding that it was time to add to their portfolio the raising of major gifts and seeking planned gifts, gifts of appreciated securities, and the like. Diane and her predecessor, Doug Holtzman, took the reins at a very interesting and pivotal time. And to learn more about Friends and Foundation, you can visit their website, investinmpl.org. So Diane has been the Chief Financial Officer and Office Manager at Sutton Ag Enterprises, Inc. in Salinas. She represents Monterey on the Mosquito Abatement District Board of Trustees and is currently Treasurer of Kinship Support Unlimited. When the pandemic hit, Diane immediately began reimagining how the Friends and Foundation would keep the library top of mind in the community at a time when we were closed and couldn't rely on any of the usual means of gathering. She has reinvented nearly every Friends and Foundation event and program, working with a very active and generous board of directors, most of whom are on this call today, and we're deeply indebted to the Friends and Foundation for so much. So Diane, will you please give us the bird's eye view from the Friends and Foundation?
Thanks, Inga. Hello. Thank you all for joining us today. Your interest in the Monterey Public Library is a testament to the community's reliance on its library and the services it provides. I want to welcome, recognize, and thank our 1849 Legacy Society members whose steadfast support validates the importance of a strong public library. Thank you for your engagement and your advocacy. A lot of Inga's and Marsha's reflections mirror my own. For one, I heartily agree it was a heck of a year to take the leadership role. You know, it's the same for most of us. The reality of the pandemic's effects on our lifestyles set in over time. I remember rummaging through my scarf drawer for something that could work as a mask and thinking, are we really doing this? Now there's a basket by the front door with 10 or 12 of them. Along this slow road to acceptance, we've found some ways to reinvent ourselves, because we've had to. I want to revisit Inga's shout out to volunteers. It's a privilege to be part of the volunteer team that supports staff in keeping sidewalk service running. They're not only dedicated, reliable, and capable, they're available, anxious for the opportunity to serve, to be in this world safely. Well, that got the friends thinking. The library basement holds a treasure trove of donated used books. We were drowning in them this time last year, right when it became clear that live book sales weren't going to be possible. Traditionally, the Friends held 2 giant book sales every year at the library and another in front of Colton Hall as part of the 4th of July celebration. Inspired by the volunteer team gathering upstairs, the Friends gathered a team in the basement. We sold used book grab bags and dove into online book sales. We held a couple contact-free outdoor events where customers filled their own grab bags of books, and we plan for more in the spring. The used book program has raised over $5,000 since beginning last summer. With a plan and a team, we're able to welcome your donations again. We promise to shepherd your books to their next best life. Volunteers staff the basement on Wednesdays and Saturdays from 1 to 3 to accept book donations and for pickup of grab bags. Like the used book program, 2020 was all about turning lemons into lemonade. In December, we held our first virtual event, a wonderful author's talk with Alka Joshi, author of the bestseller, The Henna Artist. We plan to bring more of this kind of enrichment programming in 2021. I hope you visit our website from time to time and follow us on Facebook to hear about projects like these. At first, after we tiptoed into the virtual event world, now we're going to fully embrace it on February 27th with a fresh take on chocolate and wine. Last year's chocolate and wine might very well have been your last crowd event before everything changed. Remember how fun it was to mingle in the library, enjoy fine wines, delicious chocolates, incredible savories? We missed that and promised to be back. The truth is, in addition to all that fun, Chocolate and Wine was our anchor fundraising event, raising more than $20,000 for the library every year. So please join us and support this year's virtual Chocolate and Wine. You can find out more and register at investinmpl.org. Supplementing the library budget to assure Monterey residents the library they want, need, and deserve can't be done with big fundraising events, though, even in normal times. Most nonprofit budgets depend on major gifts, as well as small, steady contributions. Like, how about if every library card holder joined the Friends and Foundation? If you haven't joined the Friends, we need you. If you have, maybe consider the next contribution level to help us meet these times. Pick up a form at Sidewalk Service or click the Join or Renew button on our website. One of the privileges of the Friends and Foundation Board is to learn about and approve contributions to support specific programs that aren't possible within the city budget. Even pre-pandemic, it was clear that the city's general fund wouldn't be able to support all that Monterey has asked of its library. We recognize substantial, longer-term challenges, and the Friends of Monterey Peninsula Library became Monterey Public Library Friends and Foundation. The purpose of the new name and expanded wingspan was to position us to seek major gifts that could meet these challenges. In the face of the 2020 budget cuts, the library's donation requests felt more like a cry for help. When the city budget eliminated all funding for it, a contribution to library collections became our obvious and immediate focus. In August, we donated $25,000 to library collections, which has added books, audiobooks, DVDs, ebooks, and other materials. This is no small thing, and we're proud to have helped. But we have to acknowledge the annual budget for collections had been 5 times that in recent years. So the Friends and Foundation Board recognized the need to launch a major fundraising campaign. And we've been working since September to raise funds for Monterey Learns, the campaign for MPL. We launched this 18-month campaign publicly this month, and you're hearing about it for the first time today. You'll be hearing and reading more about Monterey Learns in the coming weeks, and we'll celebrate the campaign launch on February 27th at Chocolate and Wine. Over the next year or so, we'll be reaching out to share the campaign's progress and goals with you, to hear your ideas and find out how you might participate. We look forward to those conversations. On behalf of Inga, Marsha, and myself, thanks for coming today. We're always amazed and humbled by the grateful community that uses, follows, and supports the Monterey Public Library. Now we're happy to take some questions. I believe we have time for a few. Mary Jane?
There. Thank you, Diane. We do. And thanks to everyone who sent in questions in advance when they registered. There's a trio of questions that might be for mostly Inga and maybe Marsha about the library reopening. And so I'll kind of batch them for you. When will the library be open to the public again? And subsidiary questions, when schools are open for in-person instruction, will the library be open for after school? And when will live story time start up again?
Excellent questions, Mary Jane. Thank you so much. So the way I think about library reopening, there are two big factors always to consider. So one is, what are the health restrictions? What's the status of the pandemic? You know, what's permissible to do, what's safe to do. So that's one issue. And of course, people know that the governor has a roadmap and each county is part of a group and there are certain restrictions, and we're in a particular color and other counties are in other colors. And you might hear about a library down in Southern California that's started, you know, doing this service again. Why isn't our library doing it? So we really have to keep up to date on the health restrictions. That's one issue. The second is funding. And even if we waved a magic wand and suddenly we were able to reopen, the question is, do we have the funds to do so safely to protect both our customers and our staff? And by safety, I mean, you know, how are we going to social distance if that's still required? How can we do transactions safely with one another? And how will we keep the surfaces in the building clean and safe? And then how will we protect the staff with appropriate PPE and barriers and so forth? And then how will we have the staff sufficient to operate such a large facility with multiple floors? So those are really the challenges: funding and health concerns. You asked an interesting question about the schools. So for those of you who may not have been here at the library after school back before the pandemic, we would have between 50 to 80 high school students and middle school students coming down the hill from their schools after school. And we had a ambitious teen program and very active teen program, a teen librarian, and kids would either be in programs or mill about or do their homework until their parents were able to come and pick them up. So the big question will be, what happens if school is back in session, but the library doesn't yet have the staffing and the capacity to accommodate that large of an influx of people? And that is a big question. Then the third issue, and I'm gonna let Marsha chime in, but the third issue is story times and kids programs. And we all know from the work that we've been doing online that there are lots of really positive things about online interactions. You know, we can close our screen and grab a snack, and we can watch things afterwards and so forth. And I can try to read other people's body language and so forth. For kids, it's really different. For kids, it's really a challenge to stay engaged with this small little screen when they've got so much energy, when they've got so much curiosity. And so as soon as we can safely do so, we want to reintroduce live children's programs, probably even before we reintroduce adult programs. However, in the meantime, we're really looking at bridge type activities and activities where you pick up some supplies from the library, you take them home, and then you have some kind of guidance from the library are the kinds of programs that we're looking into, that we started with our January Kids Create program, so that kids are not always just having to interact in a program on the screen, but have things that they can do and things that will inspire them hands-on at home from the library, in addition to, of course, the wonderful books that we provide. Marsha.
I don't know that I can add very much to that, except that we're, kind of eagerly waiting the word from the city, not only when we can open, but who's going to provide all the protective equipment and the cleaning and all the things that we need to have happen in order to have the library be safe. I thought it was very interesting that when some libraries did open in the rest of California, all they did was open the desk so that you could go and get a book. You weren't allowed to browse the stacks because that wasn't considered safe. So you would walk up and get your book and leave. And when we did the calculation of how many clients we could serve if we opened the library, it turned out that we could serve fewer people with the library open than we are with the curbside check-in. So that's why we decided not to even try to open it that way. So we really need to hear about what's going to happen, and in the meantime, provide the service do the best we can do with what we have to work with right now.
And thank you, Marsha, you make a really good point about city finances. So even if the city really wanted to have a fully functioning, robust library program, money is not going to come in overnight. The city's budget is not going to rebound overnight. It's going to take time. And so I see, just as we got used to the pandemic gradually, we're going to need to look at library services gradually expanding. And then also, what's the right size for our library services? This is an opportunity for us to really look at everything, make sure we're aligned with community priorities.
And we will be doing it with less. We know that. So trying to figure out the best way that we can deploy the staff that we have to do the things that the community wants, and do it with what we have.
Yeah.
Another question shifts us to the book budget, and was stated, will the library's book budget be restored in the coming fiscal year, beginning July 1st, 2021?
Yeah, so I don't foresee that our book budget will be the size that it had been most recently, which was $128,000 from the general fund and another $50,000 from the Friends and Foundation last year. I don't see us moving in that direction anytime soon, unfortunately. Just to be completely realistic about it, I don't see the city funding coming back that quickly. So unfortunately, what that means is we need to look at other ways to obtain those funds, or we need to look at not having as many new materials. And so it's a really, especially for a town that has, doesn't have big bookstores, it's really a challenge.
And I just wanted to add that we actually have more library card holders in Monterey than we have the population of Monterey. And a lot, so people who work in Monterey, who don't live in Monterey, but who spend a lot of time here, also have library cards. And people who are in neighboring towns who really like our library do. So our service area is actually larger than our population would appear to be, and so that makes it even more challenging.
And that is true that, one of the ways that we're going to be looking at this issue of scarce funding, but people needing access to resources, is we are working on a big project with the other neighboring public libraries. We think it'll take a few years, but eventually we hope that we can merge our catalogs, just like the Monterey and Pacific Grove catalogs are merged. Then folks would be able to borrow materials from Salinas or borrow materials from Pacific Grove with their Monterey Public Library card at the Monterey Public Library, because we all participate in a service called universal borrowing, where we allow people who live in other areas to borrow from us. So that's a down the road kind of solution where we can share our collections more, and possibly the county would join us. And if the county would join us, our collection size would more than triple. So we'll see about that. We're continuing to work on that gradually.
Shifting gears, one participant said that he is wondering about the status of the renovation. We'd written about the facilities plan in recent newsletters, and there have been articles in local newspapers. So I was wondering if you can give an update on the facilities plan, and in particular, whether solar panels are being considered on the roof.
Sure. So I'll chime in, and then Marsha, you probably want to say some things too. So in January, the City Council had a workshop where they talked about goals and goal setting. And each department talked about their goals, and our police chief talked about a goal for the police department is working towards a renovation or replacement for the police building. And I know that we need to do similar kind of work for our fire stations, and also for the sports center. The sports center needs some upgrades, and our recreation centers need upgrades as well, not to mention things like the tunnel possibly. So at this planning session, council members mentioned we really need to have a 30-year plan where we take all these facility needs and we total up what's needed, and we prioritize and make a plan for how we're going to get there. So I'm excited to say that while the library renovation plan is currently in the pending file, as Marsha said, other city departments have building needs as well. And so I think together as a city, we're going to be vocally, looking at it and discussing what we need to do to move forward on building improvements, because it's gotten to a really problematic level for many departments. And solar energy. So gosh, when we were looking at the plans, I don't believe we included solar panels, but it's certainly something that we have a very active green team, and we have solar panels on our bookmobile. I don't know why we wouldn't have solar panels on the library if that would help us.
Right. I just want to add that I don't know whether it was luck or intelligence, but we just happened to have done our feasibility study right before, as I said, the pandemic hit. And so we were the one of the few of those organizations that actually had a study with a general plan in hand when they started to do this planning session. We didn't get to the level of granularity of whether there would be solar panels. It's not an architectural plan, but so much just a kind of footprint plan and a layout. But I would imagine at this point that all of the new buildings will be considering solar at this point, with the Monterey's focus on green building.
Yes.
I think I'm going to pivot us. There were a few questions about the campaign. As a starting question, we received multiple questions about the bookmobile in particular. And so Inga, when will the bookmobile be operating again? What will it take to get it up and running? I know our seniors and customers in outlying neighborhoods miss and need it more than ever.
Yes, that is true. I've spoken to the Park Lane and Merrill Gardens, some of the other senior living facilities, and they've said, wow, as soon as you could get the bookmobile back on the road, our residents would love that. And then we also know that we visit lower income neighborhoods as well, where people just have fewer opportunities. So bringing the bookmobile back to those neighborhoods, and in fact, all the neighborhoods we visited before have a need, so it would be great to get it back up and running again. And that is one of the items that we listed on our list of items in our campaign, and we estimated it's about $30,000 just to get the staffing we need at a very minimal level to get the vehicle back on the road. One of the things about the bookmobile also is it's a moving billboard. So it helps remind people, oh, the library, that's right, the library has resources. So that's a great resource that way as well. Plus, it's a mobile hotspot. And, we've read about how important it is to have hotspots that people can connect to out in their communities.
So speaking of the campaign,
Yes.
a couple of people asked about what kinds of programs, projects, and expenses will the Monterey Learns campaign help to fund? And of course, we're just going public today and haven't really rolled out the specifics. And also, how much does the library intend to raise, and for what will the money be used? And for what will the money be used?
Sure. So I'm happy to talk, but Diane, would you like to say some things about the campaign giving opportunities, or I can go ahead?
Sure, I can. We some of the things that are earmarked that this money would go toward is primarily the collections, because we have gone over that quite a bit today, that is the most urgent deficit that we have that would fill a need for the broad base of library card holders. The other thing that Marsha talked about a little bit was the upgrade to technology that would make the operations and staffing more efficient, and that is something that we are hopeful of. But and the bookmobile, people love it, miss it, and we want to get it back on the road.
That's great. So, and speaking of smart technology, so we kind of broke that project down into two pieces. We got the funding for part one, and then we're going to be looking for the funding for part two. And we've also identified some digitization projects. So there's Digitizing the Herald. We have gotten so many requests from people who are working on their own family histories to researchers saying, oh, we noticed that your digitization of the Herald goes through 1964, but I'm researching something in 1973. And again, we just have to say we're waiting for the funds that we need to move that digitization project forward. It really helps having the paper digitized. It really helps tell the story of our community and of our community leaders. So it's an important project. Also having California history staff and programs, that's one of the things that's unique about our library is we have this very rich history in Monterey and a unique collection in the collections that we hold in our California history room. And we have somebody who's spending a few hours a week, but we clearly need more staffing and more support for the California history room. And also we've talked about circulating laptops because people say, well, one of the things that people were going to the library for were access to the computers, and how's that going to work once you're open to the public again? How can you safely have, multiple people throughout the day using the same laptop computer or desktop computer? So a circulating collection of laptops would be something that's on our list as well.
And Inga, should I say maybe a word about the the dollars and cents.
Yes.
Uh, Initially, the goal that the Friends and Foundation Board had approved for our campaign was a $200,000 goal that we had developed with the Friends and Foundations Fund Development Committee. They'd looked at the last 5 years of giving to try to suss out our capacity. And we'd also were taking into account all that wasn't going to be able to be done by the Friends, although they're defying circumstances and global pandemics and coming through. And so this $200,000 for an 18-month campaign was to us a stretch goal when we established it. But looking at our progress since September, when we've raised a little over half of that, which is much more than we've ever raised in such a short time before, I think the board, we're going to be going back to the board to do some thinking about raising that goal, and that is apt to happen sometime in the spring, based on the enormous response from the community and how well the Friends and Foundation seems to have been reinventing itself in real time. If we looked at the list that Inga and Diane just went through, that's more like $450,000 of need and that's just a start, but that seemed beyond our capacity. So the numbers are work in progress at the moment. Shall I try another question or two?
Sure.
We had hopping around.
Do we have an interlibrary loan question?
We did. We had a question about collaborating with local libraries. So sure, do you want to tell people when and if we'll be able to reinstate interlibrary loan services?
Right. So interlibrary loan service was a very well-loved service that was suspended about a decade ago because of funding issues. And we've always wanted to bring it back, but it's a very labor-intensive and expensive service where we connect with other libraries and then they lend us material, which we then temporarily catalog, and then we check it out to our customers. So in the meantime, we have a bridge service called Zip Books that's being funded completely by the state library. And the way the program works is if we don't have something in the collection and the item is available through Amazon at $50 or less, then the customer can request the item and the item is paid for by the state library, sent to the customer's home. They have it for 6 weeks and then they bring it to the library. Once we receive it, then we can catalog it and put it in our collection. So it's a way that the state library is helping us build our library collections. And it's also a way for customers to have access to materials that their library does not currently own. So that's one service. And then the other service is if we are able to band together with the other local libraries and share a catalog, then it might be that Monterey doesn't have something, but it's held at the Salinas Public Library or the Carmel Public Library, and people will be able to get it seamlessly by putting in a request in Monterey. So that's interlibrary loan for the short term. That's what we have in mind.
I'm looking at the questions and there's quite a few remaining. In the interest of time, I think maybe one last one and then,
Sure.
Pardon? Yeah.
Yeah.
So one individual who's online today told me that he'd heard or told us on the chat that he'd heard from a friend who'd emailed him directly, someone who wants to make a gift to the library when he receives his stimulus check, but he wants to do it with some anonymity, and this is a one-time gift, so he doesn't want to be recontacted. And so actually I'm posing this question and I'm going to answer it, which is that we're glad to honor any circumstances that any donor prefers, and that the best thing to do is to have the donor either email me directly at perna, PERNA@monterey.org, or at info@investinmpl.org. And we'll confidentially and happily safeguard his identity or do whatever makes him comfortable. And to please thank him for those generous impulses. Well, and one more for Diane. Diane, what does it cost to join the Friends?
Well, it's only $15 for youth or senior. For adults, it begins at $25 per year, and gee, sky's the limit. Goes up from there, but the base is the $25 level.
Thanks. I'll just say we've got quite a few more questions, and we'll either answer them directly to the individual's email who posed the question, or we'll otherwise definitely get back to you. But in the meantime, if other questions occur to you over dinner tonight, or as soon as the Zoom is over with, we are going to suggest that you get in touch with, let me just make sure I don't miss, there it is.
On the screen.
Please email refdesk@monterey.org, which is, just think of that as your information central on any topic, whether about gift giving or not. Or go ahead and use that reference line number that's there. So, Inga, do you want to close us?
Yes, so it's about 5 o'clock. It's 5:01, so it's time to wrap up. We don't want to keep you. I want to thank each and every one of you for joining us. We appreciate your interest, your questions, and your support of Monterey Public Library and the Friends and Foundation. There will be another opportunity this spring to register comments, because we're planning to do another survey, and it'll focus on many of the matters that we discussed today. And we look forward to seeing many of you either virtually on other programs, or at our sidewalk service, where you're picking up your holds or returning your books, and perhaps helping your kids participate in our winter reading program, which is again sponsored by the Kiwanis Club of Monterey. We're so grateful to them. And but most importantly, we look forward with happy anticipation to the day when we can see you within the library building, browsing the collections, consulting resources, chatting with staff, because as Marsha said, the pandemic will be over someday. So we look forward to welcoming you back into the building. Thank you.
Good night, everyone.